ISIS, Syria, Iraq, Ukraine, Iran, North Korea, Ebola. It's hard to imagine a recent time where the crises have numbered so many. It's at times like this that the world looks to the United States for leadership. It is, after all, the world's only superpower. But increasingly, there are those asking, is America losing its ability to lead? That's the question for our Turning Point tonight. Janice Stein is director of the Munk School for Global Affairs. Saeed Khan is a history professor at Wayne State University in Detroit. Bruce Jones is director of International Order and Strategy at the Brookings Institute in Washington. And Dr. Samantha Nutt is the founder of War Child Canada. Their thoughts in a moment. But first, some context.
When the United States of America withdraws from leadership from the world, it creates a vacuum and bad things happen.
Hold on, Senator. If leadership is strength in numbers, the U.S. is still on top. Look at the economy. The U.S. has the largest economy in the world, a GDP of $16.8 trillion, almost double the Chinese, 3 times Japan, and 4 times Germany. Defense spending. The latest numbers show Americans spending almost $700 billion a year. That leads the world and, in fact, is more than the next 10 countries combined. Foreign aid. Again, the U.S. is #1 at $50 billion a year, double the next largest donor. But leadership isn't all about money. It's about knowing where to go, how to get there, all while having the world on your side. But there are growing doubts about America's ability on those fronts. The bottom line is credibility and whether the rest of the world still believes the United States can lead or even wants to lead when crises hit. Just 3 examples from the last year.
This is a red line for the United States.
The red line rhetoric that led nowhere in Syria.
Your service belongs to the ages.
The departure from Iraq before many believed the job had been finished. Both contributing to the unchecked growth of ISIS.
It's really 19th century behavior in the 21st century.
And the inability, at least so far, to force the Russians out of Crimea.
America leads. We are the indispensable nation. When trouble comes up anywhere in the world, they don't call Beijing, they don't call Moscow, they call us.
Is he right, or is the U.S. losing the world's respect? If so, what impact does that have? Is someone else poised to fill the gap? All good questions. Let's try for some answers. All right, let's start with the big one. Is the U.S. losing its ability to lead? Janice.
Peter, as you said, by any objective measure, the United States is the world's leading power. So the discussion of relative decline is in part because new powers are rising and because there are some big shifts in world power.
Saeed.
Well, compared to the last decade, clearly there is less visibility of the United States leading right now. Intervention seems to be a policy that the current administration is seeking to retract part of America's posture in the world to take, as President Obama says, leading from behind is not necessarily a bad option.
Bruce.
I think it's a bad week for those who want to argue that the United States could no longer lead. In the course of the last 10 days, it put 3,000 troops in 134 nations into play to deal with Ebola, and has forged a coalition of Western and regional actors to tackle ISIS. And the IMF released a report today saying that the dollar is stronger as a global currency than it was before the global financial crisis.
So as far as you're concerned, right now, they're still very much a leader.
There's no question that they have the capacity to lead, and there's no alternative to American leadership. The real question is strategy. What strategy are they pursuing for leadership, and are they the right strategies?
Sam.
There are 2 pieces to leadership. Obviously, you have to have the capacity to lead, which is one thing, and then you have to have, in addition to the willingness to lead, you have to have an audience that's willing to follow you. You have to have an audience that actually believes in you and believes that what you're trying to accomplish is worthy of pursuing. And unfortunately, with respect to the U.S., that has declined, particularly in the past 10 years, last 15 years, and part of that is due to the war in Iraq, but other things as well, as we've discussed.
Has the U.S. lost credibility?
I think it has. We saw Secretary of State, then Secretary of State Clinton talk about a red line. Now, when you go that far and you say this or else, and then it happens, and your own Congress, you cannot get your own Congress in line to support you, that sends a message to the rest of the world that the president did not have his own house in order. That's a problem for your credibility.
Sam, credibility, do you need it?
Absolutely, you need credibility to be able to accomplish what he's trying to accomplish. There is a coalition now with battling the Islamic State, but even if you look at that coalition, in many cases it's people who are participating, but they're not participating in the most fulsome of fashions. Some of those were also people who have been participating in this conflict, that have given, in the case of Saudi Arabia, partially been financing this movement. So it is a coalition, but the U.S. credibility is on the line here. And unfortunately, I think that the moral legitimacy that the United States once had has been squandered. And there are various reasons for that. It's the partial victory in Afghanistan. It's the 2003 war in Iraq. And it's less than a victory in Libya as well.
Saeed?
Well, part of it is exactly because of America's overextension when it comes to its visibility as having intervened. The net loss of credibility is from two different arenas. One are those who think that we have intervened far too much, and the other are people who think we haven't intervened enough. So it's a lose-lose situation for America when it comes to its credibility.
Bruce, why do you think there is this perception that the U.S. has got a problem on the leadership front? Why the perception?
I think three issues. The rise of China, that Janice talked about, the global financial crisis, which emanated from Wall Street and cast doubts on American ability to manage the global economy, and what could only be described as shambolic policy on Syria. And those have all contributed to a sense of uncertainty about what the United States is going to do.
Janice?
I think that's a big part of it, but I think there's a big domestic issue here that we have the most partisan Congress in memory. It is unable to move big issues forward. And, you know, when you have that, Peter, it's very difficult. The world watches. It's very, very difficult to lead in a credible way. You know, Britain had this issue when the Prime Minister lost a crucial vote last time. So this time when that vote passed in the House of Commons, people took notice. Obama has to get the politics of this right at home.
You know, all this is happening at the same time, as both you and Bruce have pointed out. There's a shift going on, the rise of other powers. How important, how significant is that shift? It's not just China. There are other countries involved as well. Sam, how important is the shift that's happening?
The shift is significant. If you look at Africa, for example, or Asia, they're relying less and less on the U.S. financially, militarily, and so there are other options that exist, and they're pursuing those options. They're embracing relationships with China. They're embracing India, for example, particularly in African countries, and so the U.S. has become much less important in that equation.
Saeed, talk to me about the shift.
Well, we have new alignments now. Before, in the 1940s and the 1950s, we were embroiled in the Cold War. We had a much more dipolar world. We were either in the red corner or we were in the U.S. corner. Now we have the realization that, for example, much of the European Union sees Russia as its major source for energy. That is going to make it certainly a little bit more ambivalent when it comes to looking at relations with the United States and with others. And as Sam has pointed out, when we're looking at the developing world, there are new pretenders to the crown of being the benefactors in chief. China, for example, has tremendous investment in sub-Saharan Africa as well as in South America, and we find that this is something that is occurring with other countries. Turkey, for example, is starting to export a lot of light and heavy machinery into sub-Saharan Africa. So there are others who are coming up to the fore without what is perceived to be a lot of the baggage that came with American support.
Talk to us a little more about the consequences of this shift. Bruce?
I think what we're watching is what's best been described as multipolarity below the level of the United States. None of the pretenders, none of the rising powers are remotely in the same league as capability of the United States, but they are contesting for space. And that's destabilizing Asia, it's destabilizing Europe, and it's destabilizing the Middle East. So we're going to be in a very turbulent period of time. That's not a reflection of American capacity or will, it's the underlying reality that we're dealing with.
Janice?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Really what we have is one global power that has to divide its attention when Asia is changing, China, India, when Russia is now playing a much more activist role, aggressive vis-a-vis its neighbors, and when the fundamental order in the Middle East is breaking up and imploding. How the United States manages those three crises simultaneously requires great focus, great strategy, and great people to deliver. I'm not sure the United States has any of those right now.
Well, break it down. Great focus, great people, great strategies. You don't think they have any of that right now?
No. I think we've got an overstretched team in the White House that lacks the kind of depth and capacity that we've seen before. I think focus...
Well, how far back do you have to go to see that combination?
You probably have to go back to the Clinton administration, I think, to get the kind of depth in the White House and in the State Department and the Treasury and in defense that would have the capacity to stretch themselves in this kind of situation.
Saeed, where would you be on that?
Well, I think that if you want to take a look and go back, I think one of the issues that we're really finding is the tendency to then use an old operating system to go ahead and fix new problems.
Right.
One of the issues that we're finding is that the year 2014 does not have a precedence. And we find that there are a lot of institutions and a lot of mindsets, both in the White House and elsewhere, that seek to go back into a comfort zone of policy and strategy. What we're dealing with in a new kind of multipolarity, as Bruce has pointed out, under the umbrella of an American superpower still existing, is something that is unprecedented in the world. So in order to then tackle 21st century strategies, we cannot be using 19th century policies.
Sam?
Well, I was just going to pick up on what Janice was saying and sort of challenge it a little bit in the sense that I don't think, when it comes to the United States, that there has been a very good understanding of the Arab world, I think, by any presidency, frankly. It's been something, when you look at how they have managed their strategy in Iraq with respect to the Islamic State, how they managed the post-2003 conflict in Iraq, how they approach Syria, there is a very sort of a lack of understanding of the subtleties of the history of the complexity of that part of the world. And unfortunately, by intervening in that part of the world without understanding that complexity, they have in many instances created more problems than they have actually solved. And I think that is a huge part of what we're seeing now, and it's contributing to an increase in instability coming from that part of the world.
Bruce, I'm assuming that you want to put on an argument here on these.
I would push back on a couple of points, as you could imagine. Let's take the domestic issue, okay? A contested domestic political situation, during which period the United States has paid down debt after this financial crisis faster than any previous financial crisis, during which there has been an energy revolution of astonishing proportions to the point where this year the United States will overtake Russia and Saudi Arabia to become the world's largest energy producer. When you talk to Indian businessmen, when you talk to Chinese businessmen, they are transfixed by the dynamism of the American economy, even under the circumstances we're talking about. So I think the world looks more complicated than that. Yes, there is a moment of introspection and doubt in Washington. There always is after major wars. There was after Vietnam. There has been after this moment. Let's see how long that lasts. The fact of the shift in the American public opinion supporting action against ISIS, supporting even potential ground troops in Iraq, signals to me that we're not into a long period of doubt the way we were in the 30s. We're in a brief period of doubt the way we were after Vietnam.
No, I think one of the assumptions we make, which leads us astray, is that the United States can shape the world. It never could. What's happening in the Middle East goes far beyond whether the United States intervenes or not. At the height of American power after World War II, the United States could not shape the Middle East.
We've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, this question: what could change everything in the way we look at the United States? Welcome back to our turning point on the United States and whether it's losing its leadership role in the world. At the table tonight, Janice Stein, Saeed Khan, Bruce Jones, and Sam Nutt. Before I ask you that question about what could change everything, is there any other country poised trying to get in there to replace the U.S., and could they do it, Janice?
There's no contender. China's the obvious one, and it's in a race to get rich before it gets old. No chance.
No, there isn't. I mean, we have to also look at the issues of leadership from military, cultural, and financial power. Even if China wants to dominate militarily, even if it wants to dominate financially, it doesn't have any stomach to try to dominate culturally. And given all the trouble that it sees the United States going through, I'm not sure anybody really wants the job.
Bruce?
Absolutely not. China is going to have a hard time even projecting dominance in its own region, let alone globally.
Amazed that none of you are ever mentioning Putin and Russia. Sam?
I don't think anyone else wants the job. The Europeans have been cutting back on their militaries for years now, content to let the Americans take the lead, and I don't see anybody coming up, really.
What could change everything about the way we perceive the U.S.? Bruce?
The election, 2016. The history of the United States is rejuvenation through elections, and every serious contender for the presidency in 2016 is going to expand America's role in the world, not shrink it.
Saeed?
I would actually look in a different direction than Bruce. I would actually take a look at a major cataclysmic natural disaster. If something develops that could then shake the world's confidence, shake the world's stability, which can then emanate into different categories, economic, political, etc., I think there will be a reflexive action to take a look at the United States to come in and restore that position of leadership.
Almost the way it is on Ebola right now. Janice?
I agree with Bruce. It's leadership, and every serious contender in sight, Peter, I think will project more confidence. And there is an important discussion already going on in the United States now about strategy.
Sam?
I'm going to be the real voice of doom here, and we certainly all hope that this won't happen. But obviously, any kind of terrorist attack that takes place again on this side of the world would be something that would force the United States and I think other countries into taking a much more aggressive stand.
All right. Interesting discussion. I thank you all, and I thank you as well. Trying to follow all these major international stories unfolding at the same time can certainly be a challenge. But you'll always find the latest updated information at cbcnews.ca/thenational.